We all deal with uncertainty every day in our day-to-day business, but the problem is becoming more pronounced now, and there are many new ways to quantify the uncertainty. So to talk about it on the stage, we have Jeff Billo, who is the Director of Operations Planning at ERCOT. We have Garrett Crowson. You got the coolest title, Garrett. It's the Manager of Uncertainty Response at Southwest Power Pool. We have Jason Howard, who is the Director of Operations Risk Management at Mid-Continent ISO. And we have Guillermo Bautista Alderete, who is the Director of Market Performance and Advanced Analytics at California ISO. I tried Guillermo, okay? And so, Jeff, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Venkat. So as Venkat said, this is the Uncertainty Management Panel, which means I have no idea what we're going to talk about. There's a lot of uncertainty on this panel, so we'll dive into that a bit really seriously. When people found out that I was going to lead this panel, several of them were like, "What uncertainty management? What is that? I don't understand what that is." So maybe I thought I'd start with a little story, a little personal story. So back in 2020, late 2020. Woody Rickerson and Dan Woodfin came to me. I was in planning at that time, and they started explaining this problem that they were seeing operating the system. And the problem statement was essentially something like every morning the control room has a meeting where they talk about what the expectations are for the day. And what they were seeing is that, of course, you had your load forecast, you had your thermal fleet, and then you had your forecast for your wind and your solar. But more and more, there was uncertainty in those forecasts. There were things that they were seeing where they weren't sure if they were going into a tight day, whether we were going to have enough generation to serve the demand. And so they laid out a vision that they had been talking about for a while on how we can better manage that uncertainty. They didn't use those terms, but that is essentially what they were asking. I came on board in the role that I'm in now in early of 2021, and of course 6 weeks into that role, Winter Storm Uri hit, and so there were a lot of priorities that got shifted around, and so I feel like just to confess to y'all, I feel like I'm a little bit behind because some of those initiatives that we had intended to start in 2021 we had to put off for a while. But that's essentially, uncertainty management is where we are trying to manage those uncertainties better. We're trying to predict those uncertainties more. And since that time, since that conversation in 2020, we had more uncertainties. The panel just right before us, they talked about the energy storage resources, and in 2020 we didn't have very many of those on the system. That's another source of uncertainty. Of course, we're seeing also with as mentioned earlier, the increase in demand response, particularly with the LFLs, but we're seeing it really across different classes in ERCOT, and so that's sort of the challenge that we're dealing with. But I've got the three colleagues here from other ISOs, and I'm super excited to hear what they're working on, and so I'm going to start with Garrett. And I think maybe the question we'll start off with is, from your perspective, what does uncertainty look like in your system, and how are you addressing that uncertainty?
Yeah, absolutely. So at SPP, and you did a good job, summing it up. The uncertainties that we're looking at have a lot to do with. Oh yeah, I got some talking points. So. A lot to do with, basically our demand, load forecast, wind forecast. I'll kind of talk into how we got to our uncertainty response team. Yeah, we call it ERT, so it is kind of a cool name, but I couldn't really deny coming to this panel since it was uncertainty. So yeah, uncertainty response team. I'm not going to bore y'all with my background. Y'all aren't here to listen about that. We're innovation, but I'm just the guy from Arkansas that's worked at SPP for a while and has been on both reliability and market sides. Or I guess I should say Trudy, y'all's Trudy, Arkansas is how she was pronouncing it. So, or said that a lot of people pronounce it. She didn't pronounce it that way. So anyway, so kind of how the uncertainty response team, or I might start using the acronym, so you have to apologize of it. Uncertainty response team, we came about around 2018. We had a greater than 60% wind basically penetration, and we thought that was a lot. We've since hit a renewable penetration of greater than 90%, with 88% of that being wind. So we were trying to get ahead of it, but that's really where we started, the new challenges of increased variable energy and just what uncertainties came along with that. So we did start a group. It was actually formed as just a group of engineers, kind of looking at it as, with our other day jobs, looking into how we could mitigate the risk and the uncertainties in these forecasts. We've since evolved into a full-time group that I'm now the manager of at SPP. So just a quick couple of graphics to kind of explain, the gap that Jeff alluded to. So here we have basically the big three for us at SPP. We have load, wind, and then we have what we call an outage forecast, which is going to be your non-variable energy, basically outage forecast. So what could we see, coming down the pike? So really the gap between each one of these different shades of color. So at the top you have load there. You have a load forecast, and then of course you have a load forecast with an error, and that's the uncertainty that we're looking at basically trying to mitigate. But you can't just stop at load. You have to look again at the wind forecast, and this one's kind of the lighter yellow or orange. And then you have a gap there, which is your uncertainty in wind, in that wind forecast. And then you have an outage forecast, which is a lot of, how do you plan to return generators from maintenance, and the uncertainty that comes with that. So, you're going to have issues getting generators back online and things of that nature. So we have these independently, and we started out looking at those independently, but then the way we calculate those, and I might go into a little bit of that later, basically there's a coincidental factor with that kind of stuff as well. So what we ended up developing is, I guess you would say, sort of a probabilistic forecast. We've lived in a world of deterministic forecasts, plug it in, that's where we're going to settle. What we've done is we've been able to take these three variables and basically come up with a uncertainty forecast, a coincidental type forecast. The different colored line here are basically a p-value or a probability value that we've calculated within that uncertainty forecast, or percent chance of occurrence. And then we underlay the available capacity. So, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to look at, what do we have available to offset these demand, and what could our demand be? So the colored lines are our demand with uncertainty applied at certain p-values, and then we have a gray background to show the available capacity. We do this on a horizon base, so I like to comment, we're looking at 4 seconds, minutes, weeks, days, months, years. Our main, focus is within 7 days as the team, but we have started to kind of like move into the realm and get pulled into more of a seasonal planning, and even talk about resource adequacy stuff. So anyways, we do all the way to a 168-hour horizon, and that's basically how we manage uncertainty. We look into helping develop mitigation plans for this. So we help develop mitigation plans, whether that need a longer lead generator that might potentially need to start to mitigate this uncertainty. That's really what we're doing in that aspect. So, and I will pass it to Jason.
Thanks, Garrett. So appreciate the opportunity. It's been very interesting to sit and listen to lots of the previous conversations, things going on in the industry, the challenges that we face in real time. Have heard lots of relatable conversations today. So from an aspect of a system operator, especially within the MISO footprint, hearing the complexities that the inverter-based resources bring, not only to maintain reliability, but also an aspect which I did hear previously as well, is the market outcome, the efficiency aspect. So I think historically, we've had a lot of predictable generation in the past that's been reliable, easy to turn on. As the resource fleet changes, it becomes more and more complicated. And as you start to see that complication, what we talk about at MISO, the easy button is to commit generation. But that's not the most efficient outcome for our members. So an important aspect of that is being able to better predict that level of uncertainty and take on a little more risk given the situations so that we do maintain reliability, but we're also creating the most efficient market outcomes for our members. So with that, I want to highlight some things that we're doing at MISO in this space. So one of the things that's a little more unique to MISO, as you can see from our approach around net uncertainty. So I think, with what you hear and, historically what we've seen in discussions around uncertainty, it's load, wind, and solar. From our approach in looking at the total uncertainty on our system, MISO is a net importer. So one of the things that plays a critical role in ensuring that we have enough reserve margins to maintain reliability is our net scheduled interchange. And for those folks familiar with net scheduled interchange, there's a lot of complexity in trying to derive how much interchange that you're going to see on a day-to-day basis. A lot of variables go into driving whether you're importing, how much you're importing, and even in instances where you're exporting. And then also, I think Garrett highlighted a little bit from what SPP is looking at as well, but also generation availability. We've seen from some of these extreme weather events, whether it's availability of fuel or the forced outages, is looking and trying to quantify what this overall uncertainty looks like on a day-to-day basis. So one of the things that we're doing around that is, we've made an effort to go back historically and be able to quantify that net uncertainty. So essentially building a data set to train a model and utilizing variables such as temperature, our load forecast, our wind forecast, to look for like days in that training data set to be able to predict what an uncertainty level would look like for our upcoming operating days. And this is just an example of what that looks like. This is a dashboard that we create. We've actually implemented this into our production systems at the 1st of 2024. But utilizing this uncertainty, as you can see here, our initial step is taking a dive in just quantifying whether it's a low, medium, or high risk day based off that data set. So we're utilizing that information, that model, to tell us what tomorrow, and even starting to look at, we run a multi-day case that looks over a 7-day time period. So we're looking at 7 days out. But what this gives us is the ability to, as you can see from this example, look at the actual uncertainty that happened for yesterday. Then we can take that back and actually do some more investigation, potentially tweak what our processes that we have in place. Because again, this is very early, and we are looking to get this into a more granular level. Because again, it's a lot more complicated than just low, medium, and high risk. But this is our initial effort to be able to quantify that uncertainty and actually drive some good market outcomes. So with that, so why do we quantify this uncertainty? Again, I mentioned the reliability aspect. So things that we're looking at with this low, medium, and high risk is the amount of reserve margins that we carry. Historically, we've planned, and again, that's another aspect of this, is historically planning for the largest contingency. As I talked about, more granular things that we're looking to implement in the future is, those net load shifts. Those are actually the largest contingency on the system. It's not just what peak hour looks like for tomorrow. But with the initial steps that we're taking around net uncertainty, we're utilizing this information again to drive more efficient market outcomes while maintaining reliability. So historically covering 99% risk through our reserve margins. Again, we have more quantified, data-driven decisions and essentially taking on a little more risk, trusting that data to gain those market efficiencies. And one of the products that we have at MISO is our short-term reserves. So it's our 30-minute uncertainty product. So ensuring that we have the right requirements, the right attributes on the system to be able to manage a low, medium, and high risk day. And this is just an example, again, of the things that I highlighted. As you can see on the left, actually looking at that 7-day time horizon. So this actually gives us the capability to build some confidence as we see the risk level occur day over day until we get to the actual operating day. As you can see, this is actually a recent, so today's operating day, it is actually a predicted high risk on the MISO system. That's due to the temperatures in our footprint and really the wind levels. We're forecasting over 20 gigs of wind today, and you would think that's a good thing, but when you throw in it's outage season, so that's one of the things that gives us a bit of confidence in this model, with it being outage season and the model picking up what that generation availability looks like. So on a day like today with 20 gigs of wind forecasted, we may only be able to deliver 15, 16 gigs of that. So the model picks that up and is indicating that, hey, this is a high risk day because your forecast is going to be off because you're not going to be able to deliver that generation. And then I'll wrap it up here real quick with just giving a highlight of a big initiative that we're working on. MISO did receive a grant from the Department of Energy based on the application that we filed around the solar penetration. So looking at deriving software to help us better manage, and not just MISO, but that's a part of the reason to be up here today and present, building this platform, this application in a manner that others could leverage within the industry. So our concept here is bringing all the things that we're doing. I know the others here on the panel and others listening understand, we build a lot of tools, spreadsheets, gap tools. So what we're looking to do is bring that all together. We use various forecasts, so bringing all that information into a centralized location. So the criticality of the data aspect in this platform, being able to perform and computate in the time frame that we need in real-time operations. This is a venture that we just finished up the design phase at the first of this year, but something that we're really excited about. And a last important aspect, especially with things that we heard today, is the scalability. We're faced with challenges today, but we want to build a platform, an application that is scalable to face the things that we know are coming in the future. So that's where we are with MISO, and I'll hand it off to Guillermo.
Okay. Well, I don't have a slide, so let me just elaborate.
All right.
Thank you, Jeff and ERCOT, for the invitation. It's very interesting to hear very common themes among the ISOs, including ERCOT. And let me start first with the construct of what we call the uncertainty. You very well know that CAISO has been facing this aggressive penetration of renewable resources for the last decade. And we start socializing this effect by the well-known duck curve, right? When we start projecting how the solar penetration would be impacting the market and the system in the California ISO, we have this concept that we call the net load. Effectively, you have your typical conforming load. You subtract what is the contribution from solar, from wind, and what is left is effectively what has to be met with conventional resources. That is what we call the net load. Over the years, we have very aggressive energy policies that have led to the heavy penetration of these renewable resources. Currently, we have a system that peaks at about 52,000 megawatts. We peak in the summer. We are a summer peaking system. And as a reference, if you take that peak value, we have currently about 17,000 megawatts of solar. We have about 6,000 megawatts of wind. We have about 14,000 megawatts of behind the meter. That is still production, but it's just decreasing the load. And as of now, by next month, we're going to reach 10,000 megawatts of storage resources. This is the new fleet that we have to use to balance the system. For decades, the ISOs were very capable of managing the uncertainty related to the operation of the system. We know how to do the load forecast. We know the outage, the force events that may happen in the system. The integration of these new technologies, load, wind, solar, and most recently the storage resources, are introducing the variability to the system. The operators now have to deal with this constant moving target that is uncertain. And over the years, we have developed this in two phases. The first one is how we can develop market mechanisms to be able to give more efficient tools to the operators to manage the system. On the other end, we have to complement that with procedures, operationalize what becomes effectively operator judgment. Back in 2016, it is when we effectively start deploying a market product that we call the flexible ramping product. Over the years, we have realized that it is not just a matter of having the capacity, but it has to be located in the right place. And most importantly, it has to have the speed that we need. When uncertainty realizes, and it means there is a lot of variability happening in real-life system, we need to ensure that we have procured, that we have positioned the system in such a way that we can absorb those dramatic changes. We have variability, uncertainty realizing across the markets. When we go from the day-ahead market to the real-time market, we can easily talk about 5,000 megawatts of uncertainty. That effectively is more than 10 conventional units that have to move once you go from the day-ahead to the real-time to be able to absorb that variability. Once we are dealing in the real-time market, our uncertainty may be easily in the range of 1,500 megawatts. Again, that is capacity that has to be ready with the right speed to be able to absorb that variability. It's too much work for the operators to have to do that manually. This product that we developed back in 2016 is a co-optimization of the energy plus ancillary services and now plus this ramping capability. It's a market mechanism that allows the market to position resources such that when the uncertainty realizes, the market can automatically deploy that energy. It's basically transparent to the operator that uncertainty happens. Now we have that speed to absorb those changes. Over the years, we have realized that it is more complicated than that. We have been tuning that methodology to make it more effective. One item that became quite obvious is that congestion matters. So location also matters. Over the years, we have realized that it's important to have the capacity with the speed properly positioned, but also it has to be in the right places of the transmission system to be able to be deployable. In the first version, we realized very soon that much of that capacity was stranded behind transmission constraints and could not be effective. In the 2023 enhancement that we implemented, effectively we make that a nodal product. Now it's locational, it has a price, and it has the complementary settlements, how financially they are going to be compensated when they provide that service. It is important that the market has the capacity to be able to see the attributes, to leverage on the attributes of the different technologies to be able to compensate for the service that they provide to the system. Most recently, we just completed the second version of that enhancement, that is to move towards the day-ahead market. Right now, we only have the real-time solution. We're expecting that by 2026, we're going to have this new formulation of the day-ahead market that now is able to cover that uncertainty that realizes from the day ahead to the real time. Now, on the operational side, over the years, we have learned that there is very good judgment on the operators. They know how the system is moving. They know what they have. Sometimes they may just only see the effect of what's going on. And we try to improve that, make sure that there is a consistent way to handle the uncertainty in the system, and that we can operationalize many of those judgments that they have to take. One of those, for instance, came very obvious once we have to deal with these extreme weather events, the summer. Back in 2020, again, back in 2022, we have these extreme events and outliers that really put to the test all the capability that we can have to absorb the variability. Since then, we have operationalized all our procedures. We start looking 7 days in advance. What is the projection for wind, for load, for solar, so that we can really start taking actions as we approach the real-time operation. We don't have the 3 levels that you indicated, but we have the green, orange, and red. That is quite equivalent to indicate, based on the supply that we projected to have, that internalizes outages, that internalizes also the conditions on the wider west, compare against the net load that we're going to be facing. That includes the variability of the load, the wind, the solar. And as we progress from day 7 up to day +1, we can really assess if we really have all the capacity that we need to be able to sustain the condition that is projected to happen. As we move into the real time, that is when we really have all the visibility, all the outage information, all the transmission conditions, and the most accurate forecast that we may have for load, wind, and solar. And we have a protocol, basically, of awareness and communication to let not only participants know what's going on, but to the public in general, what our condition is going to be. There may be events such as calling for energy conservation in some cases that is part of that protocol. And that, complemented with the market solutions, is what is positioning us to better handle the uncertainty that realizes eventually in the real life system.
Okay, thank you. And Guillermo, what you're just describing a minute ago, I want to maybe dive into that a little bit further. It sounds like you all have undertaken these initiatives to try to quantify the uncertainty a bit more. I'm wondering, is there still a qualitative aspect to that uncertainty, or are you trying to move away from that and just strictly quantify it as much as you can?
Yes, and there is something very interesting here, because we still have a platform that is deterministic. We have to run the market based on one single load forecast. On top of that, we have the requirements for the uncertainty. It's effectively another type of requirement that we impose on the market. We have been exploring the methodologies that we can leverage to estimate that uncertainty. That is still an elusive target, I would say. We have all the historical information of the variability, and we use some type of regression-like training model to be able to estimate, based on the current forecasting conditions that we project for the next day, potentially how much uncertainty we have to cover. We are not trying to cover the most extreme case. We are still always assessing the cost-benefit of what we get for what we are asking for. We try to cover the P97.5. Effectively, it's a 95% confidence interval up and down to ensure that most of the time we are going to be able to handle the uncertainty. For many years, we use a very simplistic statistic approach that is no more than a histogram. You take all your samples and you pick a percentile. That's it. It was a kind of dumb approach because it doesn't react to the current conditions. Now we have evolved that methodology to ensure that it's also reactive. We use the regressors based on the load, wind, and solar forecast that we have for that trading day. And that is giving us some benefit of accuracy, and we still continue to assess and tune that methodology.
Okay, yeah, Garrett, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that. The qualitative versus the quantitative. We do a lot of similar things with the quantitative piece, where we're looking at a forecasted temperature, we're looking at a forecasted wind amount, and we've basically created bins, BIN, to come up with a statistical probability based on the future of the uncertainty and historical errors that have occurred with that. That was done starting in 2018 with us really trying to correlate as the group of engineers, what characteristics we bend these forecasts into. Not necessarily, another plug for AI, but where it's trained on a broad spectrum of variables and then comes up with a model. We basically did the training and tried to look for the correlation ourselves. Because of that, the qualitative piece plays a big part still, and the reason the teams, I feel like, exist at SPP is more, you're going to have some projections that might seem out of line. Some of the things we've learned with very high potential temperatures that have load amounts in the summer could be supported by stronger winds from the Gulf. Just some things that the statistics may miss that haven't been trained yet into our model, I'd say. So we do a lot of qualitative. Our team has an on-call, and that's the job. Instead of automating it and picking a certain probability to operate on all the time, the ask is to question it. Is it right? Is it wrong? What are we looking at? Could it happen? Could it not happen? And come up with, basically a decision, to Guillermo's point, to put in, maybe a deterministic forecast that is one of those colored lines on our graph, one of the probabilities. So I do think the qualitative piece still plays a big part until, we can get a perfect AI model, which I don't know if that's going to happen. So maybe it will.
Yeah, Jason, I'm curious your thoughts on that kind of qualitative, quantitative, that discussion.
Yeah, I think it's similar. Hearing Garrett just talk about, the existence and reasons for these teams. I know at MISO we're talking internally that this is new. I mean, it's not new, but I think for a lot of us moving in this direction, it's new. So one, understanding, is it the right direction? Is it the right model? You have staff in place to help build this uncertainty program, but I think in the future, it looks a bit different. Once it's stood up, once we all feel comfortable that it's the right things, the directions that we're heading, those teams look a little bit differently. With what I presented on our uncertainty platform, I heard it before of, AI is not going to replace, the human operator. There's still a monitoring aspect of that, but one of the things that I think for all of us moving in that type of direction, we're starting to see the operator dynamic change. Utilizing 15 years of experience to be able to make decisions is changing. We're looking at, thinking of, an operator may have no more than 5 years of experience before they start turning over, wanting to do some different things in the organization. So again, I think part of that is it's for the foreseeable future. It's trying to figure this all out and ensuring that it's the right thing and going to work, and then that landscape kind of changes from there.
Yeah, so maybe let's talk about this a little bit. So Jason, you mentioned earlier something that caused a little tension in me. You said we have to be willing to take more risk. And I know I saw my control room guy, Jimmy, out there earlier somewhere, and he's probably cringing right now. But tell me a little bit, for all three of you, as you have gone down this path, how you're trying to quantify that risk more, you're trying to operate to what you're quantifying. How has that been received by the men and women in the control room, and what has that been like for you guys?
Yeah, I can start with that. So yeah, that is. I mean, I think for all of us that understand and are part of operations, have an understanding of operations, it's a culture shift. Again, reliability at all cost has been, more of that traditional stance in how we manage our systems. So moving in an uncertainty and managing day to day based on a level of risk is a huge change for the control room. I know just from recent experience, We had more of our first test. It's still spring, but more of summer-like conditions on our footprint. And, as I talked about earlier of the historical way we've planned for the system is ensuring that we have reserve margins to cover 99% risk. Again, that's not the most efficient thing to do. So on a recent operating day, we intentionally handed off 5% of reserve margin, where historically that's been upwards of 9 and 10%. So when you make conscious decisions like that, and knowing from history that, again, there can be uncertainty that plays out, that makes control room folks very uneasy. So I think it's a huge shift from that aspect of, again, feeling comfortable and confident in the direction that we're moving. So I know that's a big challenge that we face, is ensuring that our control room folks, understand to a degree and are confident and comfortable in the direction that we're moving.
I can follow up on that. I think we have to start recognizing that inherent to the position of being in the control room, there is the nature of the risk. It is an asymmetrical risk. The consequences for being short versus being long are quite different, right? Nobody's going to care if they are long one evening because nothing happened. If you're on the opposite side, it's quite a different story. Now, with all these moving targets and dynamics that are happening through the market, we have to recognize that the landscape for the operators has changed dramatically. All gone are the days where they have full visibility and awareness of everything that's happening. What is going to happen 7 days in advance is unknown for them, and trying to bridge that gap of awareness and visibility is critical for the operators. We understand that the old days of operating at all costs may not be easy to navigate these days. There is always this mindset that there is a cost benefit to assess versus how much reliability you want to keep at what cost. And I have to say, after the fact, that is a factor that we have to consider to assess when we are providing this type of tools to the operators. On the other end, you may hear from the operators that they don't want to be in a position where they have to be making judgment calls. It's give me the information, give me awareness of what's going on, and I can decide how to operate the system. Right? But with all these dynamics and uncertainty happening, that is a harder thing to accomplish. And having these programmatic and systematic calculations bridge that gap to some extent of giving them more assurance of knowing what's going on in the system, knowing they can count on certain resources that, yes, the system is going to operating them at the edge, right? That is one of the hardest things for an operator to realize, that when you clear a market, the market is not going to give you a single megawatt in excess. It's going to be on the edge. And that is the comfort that they have to learn to navigate when operating a market. And that is when all these market products could be useful, because it gives them that extra assurance that there are things for them to fall back when things go tight. Providing this uncertainty product is one of these elements that, yes, the market is giving me the capability, the speed that I need when things are going to be moving that fast. I have to say, at the end of the day, it's also the last resort for operators to make calls of how to adjust the system, and they are bounded to happen.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit on our operation size and our operators. I think, prior to 2018, they were operating without the risk altogether until our team was formed. I mean, there was things in place for risk, contingency reserves, regulating reserve. That was what your risk was, and you may enter into, a resource advisory for us, or some levels of alerts that may help, maybe with interchange and things, just send signals. But I think we haven't maybe crossed over the peak of coming back down the other side of, going to the floor and saying, hey, we were operating with this risk and we're going to go back to a lower risk. So I think you know, from their perspective, we've done nothing but help them out in that perspective. But again, there's also a cost to that, and so, you know, not shifting gears from the operators, but then you go, you know, speak and talk to stakeholders. You know, what you're creating more reserves, more headroom. You know, price spikes aren't maybe as prevalent during those time periods. So there's always two sides. I don't think we've crossed over to that realm where we're about to have that conversation, but we're definitely getting there, and I think, you know, that's going to happen. We do mitigate that with, you know, kind of our process of we only incrementally try to mitigate the problem. So, you know, for example, we don't plug in a full deterministic forecast from like a 99th percentile probabilistic forecast and then take all generation commitments around that 4 days ahead of time. We only try to add the incremental decisions that we need at that point, otherwise we can't take them. So if you have a unit that takes 4 days to start up, you make that decision now because of a risk, but you don't take a 4-hour startup unit 4 days in advance because of a risk. So we have had some success in that. I think the biggest deal for becoming comfortable with risk is understanding it in the first place. So I've heard the words educate and learn and a lot today in all these panels. I think that's one of the biggest hurdles and the things that we've had is just educating on what the risk is. I mean, there's a known risk that's been around for a while, and in the resource adequacy realm, you know, 1 day in 10 years, some probably heard that. But I think in the operations realm, it has been serve load at all costs. So I think educating on what the risk is going to be very important, and what certain generation types could bring to the table, and managing that uncertainty is going to be key to getting us to being more comfortable with the risk. So.
All right, so you've all have talked about the initiatives that you have put in place, the really cool stuff that you're doing. But as you sit here in 2024 and you're looking out further, what's sort of the next thing for you? What's the next kind of the next step in this journey of managing uncertainty?
I'll just continue. I think it's what everybody's presented on here today. So for us, you know, wind has been on the forefront. I think for us, adapting and quantifying the risk that comes with the way the systems are changing is huge. I think that we obviously, in Casey's here, he was on the next panel. I don't know our generation queue like he does, but it's coming for us as well. So staying ahead of it, I think that's our main goal. You know, trying not to, you know, drive the car in the race at the same time as design it. You know, getting ahead, you know, think about this stuff as it comes and quantify the risk that comes with it. So that's really just our, you know, we were reactive a little bit in 2018 with the team. I think we'd like to kind of see us be on the, you know, forefront and like Jason's initiative and others be ahead of this stuff before we get on the track. So.
Yeah, I think for MISO, you know, one is, again, this stuff is still new and continued work in this space. But from our footprint, you know, we have a little over 30 gigs of wind and just reaching 6 gigawatts of solar. So solar has really grown within the past year and a half. So it's still very new to MISO. I know ERCOT, California, has been dealing with a considerable more amount of solar, but things that we're looking at too, it's new to our footprint, and then I think it brings different challenges when you look at the landscape of MISO's footprint. So snow, the various weather patterns that cross our north and south regions. So continuing that learning process with solar. And then I would think the next biggest thing from MISO's perspective is Order 2222. So DERs participating in our markets is going to be a very big undertaking, you know, given the system design, the visibility that, you know, we've heard today as well. So those are a few things on my mind that I think are in the foreseeable future that they're going to present some continued challenges.
I would say in the near term, we have a couple of items that we have to complete. One of them is the introduction of the uncertainty product to the day-ahead market that is scheduled for 2026. The other piece that we're working actively is the expansion of the market, right? I think there are a lot of benefits for having a diverse geography and fuel supply when you have an expanded market. And that has proved to be very effective right now for the real-time market. And I would say this is not something that you set and you are done. It's an evolving problem statement, and we have to adapt to those conditions. Just to put as a reference, right? A few years ago, we were dealing with a challenge that we have oversupply conditions just because we have too much solar. We have to reduce solar in the middle of the day. That was a waste of clean energy. And we implemented a series of enhancements to tackle that problem. And then storage resources came and became a natural solution for the oversupply. Right? So there will be new technologies. We have to adapt to the supply mix we are going to be dealing with in the future. Yes, they are going to pose potentially different and more challenges, and some of them are going to pose opportunities for us to address existing problems. I would say that we just have to stay agile to adapt to the evolving problem, because it's not a finite target that we have here.
Okay. So I'm going to pause there and see, Venkat, do we have any audience questions?
Well, there is one certainly for Garrett in terms of, hey, your title is cool. So what does that even mean? And is it like a risk desk?
What was that? I didn't get it.
It's about your title.
Oh.
For sure. Of course, it's not just me. Looks like a lot of people are fascinated by that.
Yeah.
And I think the question is really, is there like a risk desk at SPP?
Okay. No, we don't have it. We don't have a desk. Again, a little bit of background on the team. It was created by a host of engineers that began to quantify and calculate the risk. And again, I mentioned Casey's on the next panel. It was actually chartered, a little charter. We put it together. I think we may have thought at first it was going to be, okay, let's put this and quantify this risk together, and then, as some have alluded to, that's not what happened. So it was, we had to keep being adaptive, and so then it was actually me and another engineer that took that as a full-time job. We are on our operations floor, or we were then and are now, but we were there, and we didn't even have an official title of uncertainty response team, but everybody called us the ERT. And then just recently, I think February, March, I became we established an actual team of 4 other, we're actually technical analysts is what they are, and I'm the manager of that team. So we've toyed around with a lot of different acronyms. ERT kind of rang, so we went with uncertainty response team, and that's how it started. So,
yeah, Jeff, we do have a very interesting question here. What is the biggest computational barrier for you to manage the uncertainty?
Like the hardest computational value for us? I think right now it's pretty simple for, I don't want to say simple, but we've established a model that works fairly well, and it's not very computationally heavy. Wind would probably be one of the hardest, trying to get better at the wind forecast uncertainty, trying to get very granular data down into that. I think we're moving towards a computationally hard area. We're looking at, dense neural network, AI forecast, and trying to implement that. That's kind of like a side R&D in the ERT department right now, but it's not official. But we're looking into things of that nature, which can become very computationally heavy. But right now, with our base model, we're pretty good. We can, we run our uncertainty and update it basically every hour. So we have a look, that chart that goes out 168 hours, we can run that every hour fairly well. But that is off a model that we've come up with. If we're going to dynamically have models that learn and create, that can become very computationally heavy. So.
And are you doing your statistical wind forecast, or are you doing that just on a system-wide basis or regional or down to the wind plant?
Yeah, so we actually do all of ours on a system-wide basis, and then when we apply it as a deterministic forecast into a study, it gets pro-rata down based on the output. So I will say that's another hurdle and something I left off of the future locational uncertainty is what we call it, or calling it, is a hot topic, but that can become very computationally aggressive in nature. So right now we are system-wide uncertainty is how we look, and we pro-rata it down.
Okay.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic because I think there are two pieces to the answer. One is the computational effort related to the actual calculation of the uncertainty that, among all things, could be relatively mild, I would say. The challenge is not about the computational effort, it's about the right model, how to find the right model to estimate the right uncertainty. Now, the real challenge, in my view, is more about how you deploy that uncertainty into the market. At the end, it's just a requirement, right? You come with a requirement, and now how do you utilize that to inform the market and the operations how to use that? That is where things can get complicated, and we have some experience with that. For instance, one basic challenge is when you move from the day ahead to the real time. The granularity is a challenge. You have hourly intervals in the day ahead, 15 or 5-minute intervals in the real time. We try indeed to explore if we were able to do a 15-minute interval for the day ahead market. That happens to be too challenging to compute on time. You also have the challenges if you want to do the uncertainty to be locational, because we know congestion matters. Then you have to deal basically with another type of transmission constraints to solve as part of the energy solution, right? Now you are doubling the amount of constraints that you have to solve in the optimization. If you want to do that every 5 minutes, the problem really becomes very challenging to accomplish on time.
Yeah, I would just add, to that question, and remembering the visual of our platform, one of those risk inputs that I think we really haven't dove into because of its complexity is the congestion aspect. So as I mentioned earlier with our wind forecast and not being able to deliver, that's really at an aggregate level. But as we look and really need to get more locational, as Garrett mentioned, figuring out those congestion patterns based on outages, potential forced outages, things of that nature, that gets into some very complex modeling of how that looks like. So that's one of the key risk factors, and from our risk inputs on that visual, it's at the bottom just because we do feel it serves the most complexity in trying to figure out.
Time. So if y'all would join me in thanking our panelists.
God bless.